All right, thank you for staying with the Monday Report. Over the next hour, we'll discuss the talk about talks, all right? It's supposed to be a 10-member team. Azimio team have already selected 5 of their own. That is led by Kalonzo Musyoka as the delegation leader, Eugene Wamalwa, DAP party leader, Wandayi, minority leader, Omogeni, Senator Nyamira, and Omogeni Mnyazi, member of parliament, Malindi. The Kenya Kwanza side is yet to select their team, but there are 5 issues that they've already talked about, which they disagree on already. The Azimio team is talking about cost of living, bipartisan reconstitution of IEBC, audit of the 2022 elections, respect for political parties, inclusivity in the national affairs. And that's a conversation I'd like to hear from you. Where are your priority areas? At Trevor Mbija at Citizen TV Kenya, use the hashtag Monday Report. Let me introduce my guest one more time. Eric Deuri is here, President, Law Society of Kenya, that is LSK. Asante sana for making time. Sheikh Ibrahim Lithomi is also here from SUPKEM, that is the Supreme Council of Kenya Muslims. Thank you so much for making time. And Diana Gishengo, National Coordinator, TISA, that is the Institute of Social Accountability. Asante sana for making time. And Diana, I'll start with you. You're the first one here anyway. So what form should these talks take in your view? They've picked 10-member team. They said 2 should be non-politicians, but we've already seen the lists from the Azimio team. Are you satisfied with the format that these talks are going to take, or should it have been broadened more?
I don't know. You can't speak about form without substance. It's very clear, and like we have rightly titled the talks, they're talks about talks. So I see this as just talks to create a truce, to create the needed environment for us to begin the conversations that we require. And when you think about, let's say, the issues that have been tabled on both sides, the bipartisan issues, whether it's IEBC, the 2/3 gender rule, there's nothing about the members constituted so far that is supposed to give us any confidence that these are the best people to lead the process. But definitely, we laud the fact that these 2 people have agreed to come together. Away from that, because the truce will be created by the president and the former prime minister. The minute they do that, we should not waste time with these 2 groups of 10 people. And if you think about it, who do they report to? Will they come and report back to us, Kenya? No. The 5 people in Kenya Kwanza will report back to the president. The 5 people in Azimio will report back to Raila Amolo Odinga. Where is the Kenyan citizen in all these talks? They're nowhere. They are nowhere. And at a time when we have all had this conversation, the parliament is no longer the place for dialogue, because parliament has become a place of contestation, yet in our democracy, it was supposed to be the place for that dialogue. And even when there are challenges, it should be opened up for the citizen, the active citizen, no longer the subject, to be able to come and be heard in a respectable and a non-partisan way. But that is no longer the case. Yeah. For the issues that are facing us, cost of living, something that we should all agree, that Kenya Kwanza families and Azimio families are having trouble placing food on the table. They have a problem paying their loans. They have a problem paying school fees, both sides. It shouldn't be so difficult. But because parliament is a place of contest, rather than national interest, we now have to find an alternative space. The 2 constituted groups, they don't give confidence. All they tell us is there will be a truce, and what I expect, if it is true that His Excellency Obasanjo is coming, Obasanjo, what will he do to bring down the cost of living? Okay. Will he make us vote for more women through the 2/3? Will he make us respect the constitution around the CDF? I don't think so. So all we expect is an environment for trust building. Okay. Then we can get into the real issue, and that space definitely needs a lot of expansion to get more voices on board. Okay, the Kenya Kwanza is yet to list their members, but Sheikh, which format should this dialogue have taken? The clergy, for example, have you been invited to the table?
Trevor, let me begin by saying this. As a Kenyan, I think this is welcome, because there is no way out of the problems that we are facing as Kenyans except a dialogue. We need to talk with each other. We have been talking at each other, and the country is burning. Now, when you talk about this dialogue, It's like a person who has been brought, you know, a doctor with a patient in front of them. Kenya is ailing now. Kenya is almost going to the ICU, God forbid. And we need a cure for the problems that we are facing. So when you talk about any talks, they should be talks that will address the problem that is facing us. We need to ask ourselves, why are we where we are today as Kenyans? Why are Kenyans dying in the streets? Why are they burning tires? Why are they destroying property? Why do they feel dissatisfied with the people that they have entrusted with the resources and the decisions of this country? So the talks should be about those issues, okay? Yeah. Because those are the issues that are going to address the problems that Kenyans are facing. And something that our sister here said, Obasanjo, or not Obasanjo, no Obasanjo, if there is no goodwill from the Kenyans themselves, because he will come and go. The late Kofi Annan came here and he went. The baby was left with us. So Ambassador or any other person who wishes well this country, you know, they are welcome. But at the end of the day, it is we Kenyans, what do we want? But when we, you know, the LSK chairman was just talking to me as we were waiting to come in here about politicizing everything, bringing politics into everything, you know, we can already see politics in this. You know, so I think we need to sober up. And again, and I've always said it in this forum and other forums, and I'll continue saying about it. You know, it's like for a moment, there are no other people in this country or stakeholders. The only stakeholders who matter in this country are the politicians. And I think this is where we get it wrong. Yeah. And I think it is important for the voices of other stakeholders to be included in this, and especially voices of stakeholders that do not have vested interest. Yeah. The politicians, unfortunately, have vested interest in this. They see politics in everything, and they think about 2027. They're already thinking about 2027. Yeah. As we are talking about the price of ugali, somebody is thinking about 2027. Mm. So I think we need to bring in other stakeholders. Yeah. Should be all inclusive. And I think I would want to urge the clergy, fellow clergy, that we need to come in now. We need to help this country get out of this problem. Okay.
Is this team inclusive enough? Or should it be broadened a bit more? Or are we simply just politicizing the dialogue, like Sheikh is saying?
Trevor, I think the challenge we are facing, one is a challenge of framework. Yes, we are having discussions, but what are we having discussions on? That is yet to come out. Of course, they are the items which Azimio has put on the table as what ought to be discussed. And I think that perhaps we need to give this a bit of time. We see how it's going to shape out. But even as we're trying to actually establish which framework is it going to take, because ideally, in a normal situation, we would be having this discussion either being handled in Parliament or through bipartisan committees set up in Parliament. But our current reality is that we are transitioning from, or rather we have transitioned from a system that was largely a mongrel of parliamentary and presidential systems into a purely presidential system. And what that means is that you would find that the losers in any political context then are out of power completely. And that's where the problem begins, because what would have been the official leader of opposition in the previous years is now someone who is outside Parliament because is a candidate who ran for election and lost and is now outside Parliament. He controls a large following, is still has the loyalty and command of a political party that has members in Parliament, and so in a sense, the members of parliament take instructions from someone who is not in parliament and who is outside parliament. And I think that is where these talks then begin to lose us in terms of how do you framework them? Where do you put them?
Yeah.
There is no law. There is no, organ that is hosting these talks. So that's the first thing that...
So that's an interesting point that you bring. So it means whatever comes out from this team then is not legally binding.
Again, now those will be the issues that as they discuss, they'll be trying to see, what kind of proposals can we come up with?
Which will still have to go to parliament.
We'll still have to find a way. Either they are going to parliament or there is a proposal to amend a law or a proposal to create a law that creates something, I think those are now the issues that we are facing. But that said and done, I think that we've had a period of political upheaval, a period of a feeling by a large segment of society of being excluded in the affairs of government. And so it is extremely difficult or near impossible to create a state where every person feels they are represented and their views are taken on board in government. And that's why these talks are necessary, so that the segment or the population of the country that feels like it has been excluded in government can feel that their voices are also being heard and that they are not being excluded in the day-to-day management of their own affairs. And I think that's where now the challenge would be, because politicians in themselves tends to be a little bit narrow in their scope, and they would want to look at their political interest that often override the national interest. You can tell that from the Kenya Kwanza side, there is still a lot of hostility and opposition to these talks. And my sense is that if the talks then are successful, there are certain people or certain headliners within Kenya Kwanza who feel that their influence in government will be reduced. And you have to remember that within Kenya Kwanza, they are shareholders. And they have come out quite openly to say that we invested in this government. And it is now our time to recover the investment which you put in this government. And so that again creates another problem that has to be surmounted and creates challenges going into the future in terms of how do you framework this discussion.
Let's talk about the issues now, and let me bring you back, Diana, on this. Are you confident with the framing of these issues? For example, let's even start with the first one, cost of living. So they say cost of living from the Azimio side. The Kenya Kwanza side, to the president himself, says we're already addressing that cost of living. Should there be a more precise proposal, or where do you think the priority areas should be? So that if it is a proposal that we want to lower the fuel levy back to 8%, that is the proposal. It's not just a blanket statement of the cost of living that nobody knows what exactly are you talking about when you say cost of living. Are you talking about the price of gas? Are you talking about the price of fuel? Are you talking about the price of unga? What are you saying?
Unfortunately, I don't think we can get to the specifics until we get to the broad framework, where we are able to move away from debate to dialogue. I think the groups as announced currently are still in the debate. And dialogue has its place in every democracy because there will always be issues that will require a higher level of cooperation, where we must forget political party lines. We must forget any other allegiance and just work towards consensus building. It will take a lot of humility to cede ground on any area that, for instance, take the cost of living. Kenya Kwanza, led by the president, will assert themselves and say, we are working very hard. The prime CS is already on record that it will be a rough 2 years, but after that, it will be bliss. Azimio will come and say, look, our members of parliament voted with the people. We even brought amendments that were shot down. There have been allegations that parliament used, but for us to discuss cost of living, we must set aside the debate and move to dialogue. So as at now, and I think this is what the whole nation, from clergy to professional association to we in civil society to media, everybody had gotten to the point where our institutions of democracy are no longer availing the needed solution. So now it is time to create that environment. Until that environment is created, let me use the example of the clergy. The clergy has already called for repeal the Finance Act 2023. So that at least we are where we were in 2022 as we move around. A few things within the economy, work on inflation that now is going down for the third month, work on our debt repayment, very, very specifically, realign our budget. But for now, the starting ground may be actually, let's start where we were at the end of the financial year, 2022-2023. But we will not be able to move to the core issue if we are still in the contest and the debate mode. This is no longer about which political side has more power, has better agency, cares more. It is about what must be done for a country that has an economic crisis, has a democratic governance crisis. We do not have IBC commissioners. What happens if any seat was to fall vacant? And no seat is protected from nature. Yeah. It may be protected from all other positions. No position is protected from nature. So it would not be, we may even have a vacancy at the presidency, a senatorial or a gubernatorial position. Who runs that particular election? What happens at that point? Do we want to now start scampering and trying to reconstitute an IEBC when we have another major crisis of trying to fill a major position? So that's a major, major problem that we have right there. Yeah. In addition to the cost of living, we may even say do away with certain taxes. But Trevor, education in this country is in ICU. From university to TVET to secondary school to CBC, where there's supposed to be an increase of 35,000 teachers, but apparently that is one teacher per CBC junior secondary. What discussions, why won't we agree to come on the table and have that particular discussion? Yeah. Now, the unfortunate thing is the history of setting up dialogue is there are always quick consensus that must be made before we do the dialogue. So 2007 immediately was the agreement that there would be formation of a government of national unity. So as the political leadership went on the negotiation table, they knew we are negotiating for Kenya, but all of us have found our space on the table. So that became the quick consensus and there was truth. Yeah. Then we created an entire process of truth, justice, reform, and institutional reform, and finally, constitutional reform. The handshake was another form of dialogue. Very, not bipartisan, it was by people, I don't know, two people initiated it, and all of a sudden we had a handshake. It created its own levels of conflict as well, but there was supposed to be an inclusive agenda that birthed BBI.
Yeah.
Again, within it was some creation of power and so on. So that is my only problem, that the political leadership must create that consensus. Okay. I suspect, even in this particular process, we will start with that process of assuring the political leadership your power, your influence is safe. Then after that, they will be ready to hear from us. Do not increase the fuel levy. Okay. 8% in the current circumstances is hard enough. 16%, we perish. Listen to Kenyans.
Okay.
And unfortunately, in the current format of things, what's the avenue for you and I to participate in this process? In a bipartisan dialogue. Even the framing of it is exclusionary, yet dialogues in democracy are supposed to create the space for inclusion. And how the initial group has been set up, I hope they will then lead us in expanding that particular task force to be more inclusive and have a national dialogue.
Right, I have to take a quick commercial break, but Sheikh, when I come back with you, I'd like to hear where are your priority areas from the religious leaders' perspective. What would you like to see on the table? When you see an item like inclusivity in national affairs, what does that mean for you? But also keep your views coming at Trevor Mbija at Citizen TV Kenya. Use the hashtag Monday Report. We're reading some of them right after this break.